They dropped their nets and they followed him. I mean, following Jesus makes you reprioritize everything. It says that these fishermen had to drop their nets. That was their livelihood. That was everything to them, but they had to drop them in order to follow the calling that Jesus had for them. And so I ask you this question. If Jesus calls you, although you may have all these questions that we're going to want to ask, all these things that we do not know, even in the face of the unknown, are you willing to have faith in the God who called you? Are you willing to drop everything? And if not, I ask you this, what's holding you back?
Action.
Okay, I am excited for this one. In case you don't know, these Sunday school episodes are pretty much just me documenting whatever I'm teaching my youth group and formatting that in a way so that my online audience can hear the messages as well. And this one, I think, is really, really special. I know it's been a few weeks, but we are finally back with another Sunday School episode. My name's Jared Baldwin, and this is Sunday School episode 2. So before I got into my main text in Luke chapter 5, I decided to take my youth group all the way back to Mark chapter 1. You might be thinking, why? Well, actually, it's the same story, but Mark leaves out a few of the details that we get in Luke chapter 1, and I did this really intentionally. Let me go ahead and walk you through it as I walked my youth group through it. Starting in Mark chapter 1, verse 16, as Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon Peter and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. "Come, follow me," Jesus said, "and I will send you out to fish for people." At once they left their nets and followed him. So I read this verse to my youth group, and everyone had just sat down. We just finished playing our game. Everyone's kind of tired, and we're like, ooh, okay, we're about to listen to the message. I read this verse, and I said, everyone, put your phones down, put your Bibles down, follow me. I was sitting on the stage. I got up, and then I walked out. And everyone's kind of looking around like, what's going on? And I said, come on. And so everyone's like, okay, kind of confused. They started to get out of their chairs and they started to follow me. Where was I going? I had no idea. But I walked out of our Family Life Center, which is the building where we meet, and then I walked around the building, and then I walked back inside through a side entrance, and I'm walking really fast, like I'm speed walking. You ever seen the Olympic speed walkers? They're going boom, boom, boom. That's what I'm doing with my hips, right? And I'm going, and they're barely keeping up, and I'm like, come on. And so I go out of the Family Life Center, back into the Family Life Center, and then we have all these things kind of being stored right now, so I was doing loops all around these different obstacles, and they're all trying to keep up. They're like, what is going on, Jared? What are you doing? And I just kept walking. I didn't say a thing. And there was one time when I walked out the side door, I sprinted down the side of the building, sprinted to the side, walked back into the main Family Life Center again. And so after like 2 minutes of walking around and having these kids like frantically and confusedly follow me, eventually I go and I sit back down on the stage, and everyone's kind of, what is going on, Jared? What are we doing? And I said, all right, everybody take a seat. And I had to catch my breath because I was really tired at that point. And I said, guys, what were some of the questions that you just asked me right there? And they were like, well, we asked you, what are you doing? We asked you, what is going on, right? Quite fair, right? I'll give it to them. And I said, do you think when Jesus called the disciples that they had questions too? I think everyone kind of sat and paused, but then quite quickly they were like, yeah, they probably had all kinds of questions. I was like, what kind of questions do you think the disciples asked? And one of my kids was like, who is this guy? That's fair, right? One of them said, can we trust you? Can we trust Jesus? That's good. I said, they were probably asking questions like, where are we going? How far are we going to have to go? What am I going to have to do? How long will we be gone? I mean, Jesus comes up to them and says, drop your nets. I'm going to send you out to fish for people. And then they do. They drop their nets and they follow Jesus. We don't get an insight into what they might have been thinking in that moment. But if I had to guess, there was probably some uncertainty and some questions in their mind saying, what is this journey going to entail? And the truth is, as a Christian, as we follow Jesus, we don't know the answer to that question. And that's where faith comes in, where we say, God, I don't know what's ahead. I don't fully know what you've called me to do, but I'm going to choose to trust you and follow you anyway. So with that, let me go ahead and bring us into our main text, which is actually Luke chapter 5. It's the same calling of the disciples, but it gives us a few more details, and those details I think are really important. So let me start at verse 1, where it says this. One day, as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, the people were crowding around him and listening to the word of God. He saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little from the shore. Then he sat down and he taught the people from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I will let down the nets." When they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And when they came, they filled both boats so full that they both began to sink. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord. I am a sinful man." For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish that they had taken, and so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. Then Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on you will fish for people." So they pulled their boats up to shore, left everything, and followed him. There's a lot of insights that we can get from this text, but I want to go ahead and start at one of the first lines here because I think it's pretty significant. One day, Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret. Now, Jesus could be anywhere, but he's at the lake of Gennesaret. And although it might be some kind of a coincidence, I don't think that there are many coincidences when it comes to God. I think that there's a lot of intentionality. And I don't think it's any kind of a coincidence that Jesus happened to be standing by the lake of Gennesaret, where who just happened to be fishing? Simon Peter. I believe that Jesus sought him out, because that's what Jesus does. Jesus sought him out. And you might be thinking like, and I want you to realize this, that Simon Peter, when he saw who Jesus was, he did not feel worthy of Jesus. And I think it's the ones that don't feel worthy that Jesus seeks out. He goes to them. I think that's so beautiful. But also, I don't think it's a coincidence, the timing at all. Now, I know that people like to rag on the disciples because it says we worked so hard all night and we didn't catch any fish. But if they were full-time fishermen, that was probably an abnormality. That was probably not normal. And I don't think the timing of Jesus showing up was a coincidence either. Let me paint this picture for you. So fishermen, they would go out at night and they would fish all night. And then they would take their fish and they would sell them fresh in the markets the next morning so that people could buy fresh fish from the night before when they had been caught. So Simon Peter, who we know from context has a wife, a mother-in-law. Maybe, we don't know if there's any more mouths to feed, but we know that he has multiple mouths to feed. He goes out one night with a few of his coworkers, and they go fishing. And they fish, and they cast a net. They bring it up, and it's empty. So they say, okay, we're going to throw it back. And they bring it up, and it's empty. They come up empty again and again and again. They fish all night until at this point they begin washing their nets, which means when they've washed their nets, that means that they're done for today. But on a time like this, when you catch no fish, I think what that means is that they had given up trying. They started washing their nets. They had given up. They were done. And then it just so happens, coincidentally, not a coincidence, that this is the day that Jesus happens to go to the lake of Gennesaret. And so Peter, after fishing the whole night, now he's washing his nets because he's given up. All of a sudden, this teacher comes, and a bunch of people are following him, and Peter's probably like, I just want to go home and get some rest. But the teacher asks if he can borrow his boat, so now Simon Peter has to stay for the teaching because he wants to make sure he gets his boat back. And Jesus teaches these people, and once he's done teaching, Simon's probably listening and like, when are you going to finish? And then once he's done teaching, Jesus says, Simon, go out and throw your nets one more time. Now, Jesus, his occupation, he was a carpenter. What he was doing, he was a teacher, he was a rabbi, but he was not a fisherman. Simon was a fisherman. All the people with him, or all the people working with him, were fishermen. And so it's kind of illogical to take advice from a carpenter and a teacher on how to fish, but he does it anyway. Why? I think that Simon Peter was desperate. I think that he fished the entire night, trying and trying and trying and trying and coming up empty again and again and again. And then all of a sudden, this man named Jesus, a teacher, comes and says, one more time. Throw your net one more time. Don't give up. And then what happens next in this text is astonishing. Simon Peter decides to obey, because what other option does he have? He just spent the whole night trying and failing and failing. He was at the end of his rope, about to give up. He already had given up. That's the best part about it. But he throws his nets out one more time, and the catch is so large. Well, you read the text. Here's what it means for us. How many times have you tried to find fulfillment and satisfaction in something? I don't know what it is for you, but you throw your net, you throw your net, you throw your net, but every time you pull it up, you come up empty again and again and again. You've given up. You've given up on the fishing, and because of how terrible things are, you've given up on God. But it's usually in that moment after we've given up, that moment of desperation, that's when Jesus shows up. And Jesus says, give me one more chance. And they do. And the catch of fish was so large that the boats began to sink. Simon Peter saw this and fell at Jesus' knees and said, go away from me, Lord, I'm a sinful man. You don't think Jesus knew that? You don't think Jesus knew who Simon Peter was? You don't think Jesus knew everything that he had done, everything that he will do, every time that he would mess up? You don't think that Jesus knew all the wrong words that he would say? But Jesus still chose him, and Jesus still comes after you and chooses you today. Don't give up on him. Because Jesus did not give up on Peter, and he's not going to give up on you. And then let me go ahead and grab one more insight from this text. Then Jesus said to Simon, don't be afraid. From now on, you will fish for people. So they pulled their boats up to shore, left everything, and followed him. I believe in Mark chapter 1, the way that it read was they dropped their nets and they followed him. You know, when I was at youth group, it was one of my greatest pleasures as being a youth pastor. We were talking about the woman at the well. And after Jesus had finished speaking to her, it said that she left her jar at the well and then ran into the village. And I talked about how that jar was probably burdensome for her to carry, but she left it at the well. And you can leave your burdens when you talk to Jesus. And so afterwards in our small groups, I had talked to our guys, and I love just hearing their insights because sometimes I can learn so much. And one of my guys in our small group said, following Jesus makes you drop everything. And I was like, whoa. I looked at him and I said, dude, you said it better than I did. You know, like, I don't even teach that. But yes. I mean, following Jesus makes you reprioritize everything. It says that these fishermen had to drop their nets. That was their livelihood. That was everything to them, but they had to drop them in order to follow the calling that Jesus had for them. And so I ask you this question. If Jesus calls you, let me bring it back to the beginning. Although you may have all these questions, what am I going to have to do? Where am I going to have to go? How long is it going to be? What am I, right? All these questions that we're going to want to ask, all these things that we do not know, even in the face of the unknown, are you willing to have faith in the God who called you? Are you willing to drop everything? And if not, I ask you this, what's holding you back? What might be the thing that you are unwilling to drop to follow God? It might be a struggle. It might be an addiction. It might be a relationship. It might be whatever. What are you having a hard time letting go of, but that thing is holding you back from following God? I want to invite you today to drop it. I want to invite you today to drop your nets, drop everything. Whatever is holding you back from God, leave it. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. Do you think that saying yes for the disciples was easy? No. Do you think that the journey that followed was easy? No. And I know for you saying yes is not easy. I know for you that the calling that God has for you may not be easy. But God never promises that it'll be easy. But I promise his plans are good. Better than anything that we can imagine. And I promise you this, following Jesus, you will finally fill that hole, that void, that emptiness that you've been feeling. Only Jesus can fill it. Our hearts are restless until they rest in you, oh God. I love that quote. So I encourage you to drop it. Leave everything. Whatever's holding you back, don't let it hold you back anymore. Drop it and say, Jesus, I'm yours. I'm yours. I'm yours. Taking the example of the disciples, drop everything and follow him. And you know what? That's all I got. I hope this teaching was able to encourage you, edify you, build you up, and teach you about God's word and how it can be applied for today. Because even though this book is really old, goodness gracious, I learn something new from it every single day. Something new that can be applied to my life. Thank you so much, God, for this book. Thank you, guys. Hope you enjoyed. Peace.